Hello, I'm Juan. I own a small cafe tucked away on a quiet street that doesn't exist on any map. It's not the kind of place you find unless you're lost, truly lost. People don't just walk in off the street. They stumble in as if guided by something invisible. The door creaks open at odd hours, and every time it does, I know someone's life is about to change, maybe even mine. The sign outside simply says, Cafe, in faded gold letters, but to some, it's a lighthouse. I make strong coffee, warm pastries, and listen more than I speak. I've seen lovers reunite, strangers cry, and souls find peace. Some say the cafe grants you what you're missing. Others think it's cursed. But I don't try to explain it. I just serve the drinks. Sometimes I look out the window and wonder how long I've been here. Time feels different inside these walls. The clocks always tick, but never move. The air smells like cinnamon and forgotten dreams. I've stopped asking why. This place chose me, not the other way around. And once you're chosen, you don't leave. It all started one rainy evening 10 years ago. I had just lost my job, my partner had left me, and my world was falling apart. I was walking through the city without direction, soaked and exhausted. That's when I saw the cafe. It wasn't there the day before, I was sure of it. But it glowed like a beacon in the storm, warm and inviting. I stepped inside, shivering. A woman with silver hair served me a cup of coffee and said, "You're right on time." I didn't know what she meant. I just nodded and drank. It was the best coffee I'd ever had. Rich, dark, with a strange sweetness I couldn't place. That night I stayed until closing, and she offered me a job. "People like you belong here," she whispered. I never saw her again. The next morning, the keys were on the counter and the cafe was mine. I don't know where she went or who she was, but from that day on, I've been here, serving, waiting, watching. The people who walk in are never ordinary. Some look lost, others desperate, and a few glow with something close to hope. They always tell me their stories, even when I don't ask. One man came in looking for his daughter, who had passed away 2 years earlier. He said he saw her in a dream, sitting in a cafe with blue curtains. Mine were red until that morning. They turned blue overnight. Another time, a young woman wandered in, silent and soaked like I had once been. She sat for hours without ordering anything. When I asked if she needed help, she just smiled and said, "No, I think I found it." Then she left a folded letter, on the table addressed to someone named Leo. I placed it behind the counter. 3 days later, a man walked in asking for her. I handed him the letter, and he wept. The cafe connects people, through time, through memory, sometimes even across death. I don't understand it, but I honor it. This place knows what people need, even when they don't. Some nights, the cafe is completely empty. The silence sits beside me like an old friend. I wipe down the tables even when they're clean, polish the cups until they shine, and listen to the hum of the espresso machine. The street outside doesn't make a sound. No cars, no footsteps. just the occasional breeze rustling leaves that never seemed to fall. Then, without warning, the bell above the door chimes. That sound always brings a chill, like the cafe has decided it's time for someone new. One night, a boy no older than 10 wandered in, barefoot and holding a stuffed bear. He didn't speak, but walked straight to a corner booth and sat there, quietly. I brought him warm milk and a cookie. He smiled. When I asked where his parents were, he pointed to the ceiling and whispered, "Upstairs." But there's no upstairs in the cafe. I checked. When I turned back, the boy was gone, and so was the cookie. People often ask me if the cafe is haunted. I never know how to answer. It's not ghosts that walk these floors. It's memories. Echoes of lives unfinished, loves unspoken, and chances never taken. Sometimes the air carries a scent that doesn't belong. Lavender, cigar smoke, rain, on dry earth. A woman once walked in smelling like roses even though it was snowing outside. She wore a wedding dress, soaked and torn. Her mascara was running and her hands trembled. I made her chamomile tea. She didn't speak, but stared out the window like she was waiting for someone. Hours passed. Then, right before midnight, a man in a tuxedo stepped in. Their eyes met, and neither said a word. He took her hand, they nodded at me, and they left together. I never saw them again. I think some people only need a place to pause, to breathe, before returning to their story. I've tried to leave the cafe once. It was after a quiet week with no visitors. I thought maybe my time was up. I locked the doors, turned off the lights, and stepped outside. The city looked unfamiliar, like a dream. I walked for hours, but every street turned back on itself. Every turn led me to the same place. And when I finally gave up and returned, the lights were on again. A hot cup of coffee was waiting on the counter, and a note in my handwriting read, "You're not finished." I never tried to leave again. Maybe I'm part of the magic now. Maybe the cafe needs a keeper, someone to tend the flame. I've made peace with that. My life is not ordinary, but it has meaning. Here, I witness miracles in silence. There's one table near the window that seems to choose who sits there. It's always clean, always warm from the sun, even on cloudy days. The people who sit there usually don't stay long. One girl sat there and wrote a goodbye letter to her father. She said he had died before she could tell him she forgave him. She left the letter on the table and left without a word. A few minutes later, an old man walked in, sat at the same table, picked up the letter, and cried like a child. He never ordered anything, just sat, read, and wept. When he left, the letter was gone. Things like that happen all the time. It's as if the cafe rearranges time and space to bring people what they need, even when they don't know what they're looking for. There's music in the cafe, but no speakers. It's not always the same. Some days it's jazz, soft and sultry. Other days, it's a lullaby I swear I've heard in my dreams. Sometimes there's no melody at all, just the rhythmic ticking of the clock that doesn't move. I asked a customer once if she heard the music, and she said, "Only when I'm thinking of him." She meant her son, lost at sea. She came, Every year on the same day, sat in the same seat and listened to the same tune. One year, she brought a seashell and placed it on the table. She said it was from his last trip. That night, the cafe smelled like salt and wind. I could hear waves crashing outside, even though we're nowhere near the ocean. The next day, she didn't come, but the seashell stayed. I keep it on a shelf behind the counter now. One morning, a man in a military uniform walked in. His face was pale. His eyes haunted. He asked for black coffee, no sugar, and sat with his back to the door. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. I served him and left him alone. A few hours later, a younger man entered. Same uniform, same tired eyes. They noticed each other and froze. I later found out they were brothers, each thinking the other had died in war. The cafe had brought them back together. They stayed until closing, talking, laughing, crying. Before they left, one of them said to me, "I don't know what this place is, but thank you." Moments like that remind me why I stay. Not for the money, not for the coffee, but for the reunions, the mending of broken things. Sometimes I see people I've never met, but I know them, like pieces from dreams or chapters from someone else's life. A woman came in once who looked exactly like my grandmother, but younger, glowing. She sat across from me and smiled. "Juan," she said, "you've done well." I froze. I couldn't speak. She reached across the table and held my hand. Her touch was warm, familiar. Then she stood and left, disappearing before she reached the door. I checked the chair she sat on. It was warm. The coffee she never ordered was half empty. I don't know what I believe anymore, but I know that moment was real. The cafe brings more than people. It brings answers. Sometimes even questions I didn't know I had. I once had a regular who came every Thursday at 3 p.m. sharp. He always ordered the same thing, espresso with a twist of lemon. He never spoke much, just sat and wrote in a little leather notebook. One day he left the notebook behind. I opened it, thinking I'd find contact info. Instead, I found poems. Hundreds of them. All about the same woman. Her laugh, her walk, her perfume. At the back, there was a drawing of her sitting in the cafe. The next day, she walked in. Same eyes, same hair, same aura. She sat at his usual table, looked around and whispered, "He found me." I gave her the notebook. She cried, then left. Neither of them ever came back. But their story still lingers in the air. Like the lemon zest he always ordered, a few customers ask if they can stay. They don't mean for an hour, they mean forever. I always smile and say, this place isn't meant for staying. It's meant for finding. Some get it, others don't. A man once tried to sleep on one of the couches. In the morning he was gone, and a small potted plant sat where he had been. I watered it. It bloomed blue flowers I've never seen before. The cafe has rules even if I don't know them. People appear and disappear, but no one stays against the cafe's will. Not even me. I just happen to belong here. For now. Maybe one day I'll be gone too, and someone else will take my place. Until then, I keep the doors open and the coffee warm. There are no mirrors in the cafe. I took them all down years ago. Not because I don't like them, but because they showed things that weren't there. Once, I caught a reflection of someone behind me, even though I was alone. I turned, and the room was empty, but the feeling lingered, like someone brushing past your shoulder. Customers noticed it too. A few got scared, so I removed the mirrors, and peace returned. Still, sometimes in the windows when the light hits just right, I catch glimpses, not of ghosts, but of possibilities. Other versions of the cafe, other versions of me. It's like the cafe exists in every moment at once. Past, present, future, all folded into one sip of coffee. One rainy afternoon, a woman arrived, soaking wet, her umbrella turned inside out by the wind. She looked flustered, frustrated, and heartbroken all at once. She sat down without ordering, staring blankly at the raindrops racing down the window. I brought her a cup of peppermint tea unasked. She looked up at me and asked, "Why peppermint?" I shrugged and said, "It's what your grandmother used to make." She stared at me like I had read her mind. Maybe I had. Or maybe the cafe did. She took a sip and smiled. "She used to give it to me when I was sad," she whispered. "Said it would make the world seem lighter." We sat in silence while the storm passed. When she left, she kissed the mug and whispered, "Thank you, Abuela." I didn't tell her the tea had never been on the menu. There was a man who came in every day for a week, always carrying an old photograph. He'd place it on the table, order 2 cappuccinos, and talk to the picture as if it were alive. One day, I asked him about it. He said it was his wife. They used to come to this cafe long ago before it had a name, before it vanished from the maps. "This place remembers," he said, "and so do I." He told me she passed away on a Tuesday, exactly at noon with sunlight on her face. That's when he always came, Tuesdays at noon, when the light hit the same way. On the 7th visit, he left the photo and only ordered 1 coffee. I haven't seen him since. But sometimes I find 2 mugs on that table, still warm, with lipstick on one of them. One night the cafe smelled like cinnamon, sugar, and something older, like memory. A teenage girl walked in, clearly upset. She wore a prom dress. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. She said nothing, just curled up in a chair and cried. I brought her a slice of apple pie, still warm. She blinked in surprise. "How did you know?" I told her the cafe has good instincts. She said her grandmother used to bake the same pie every Sunday. They'd sit together and talk about boys, life, and dreams. "She would have told me to leave him," she said between bites. "He danced with someone else tonight." I asked if she wanted to talk. She smiled, shook her head, and whispered, "I just needed the pie." She left her corsage behind. I pressed it in a book on the shelf. I've never seen a clock move in the cafe. They all seem to be stuck, different times, different moments, frozen. And yet, somehow, time still passes. People come in and out. Day becomes night. Coffee cools. One clock above the counter always says 4:44. A man once came in and stared at it for a full 10 minutes before speaking. "That was the exact time she said yes," he whispered. "She's gone now, but I wanted to see it again." He stayed for an hour, then stood and saluted the clock like an old soldier paying tribute. I never adjusted the hands. Maybe I'm not supposed to. Each frozen time means something to someone. Maybe that's why they stop, to hold a memory in place, like a bookmark in someone's story. Sometimes the cafe speaks to me, not with words, but with feelings. I'll walk in and know today is meant for someone important. I'll feel joy bubbling up or sadness in my chest. The air thickens or lightens depending on who's coming. On the day she walked in, her, the one I'd dreamed about since I was young, I felt everything at once. Her name was Clara. She had hair like autumn leaves and eyes that saw straight through time. She asked for coffee with cream, no sugar. I asked her why. Because life is bitter, but I don't want to forget it, she said. We talked for hours. It felt like years. She told me things I hadn't said aloud even to myself. Then she left, just like that. No goodbye. Only the imprint of her fingertips on the coffee cup. I haven't seen her again. But I wait. A boy once came in carrying a violin case. He couldn't have been older than 16. He asked for a quiet corner and a glass of water. I gave him both. After sitting in silence for a long time, he asked if he could play. I nodded. He stood, opened the case, and filled the cafe with a melody so haunting it brought tears to my eyes. He played like he had lived 100 lifetimes. When he finished, the room felt different. Lighter, quieter, like something sacred had passed through. He didn't ask for applause. He packed up and left. The next day, a woman walked in, crying. I heard the music, she said. He was my son. He died last year. I showed her where he had played. She kissed the floor and whispered, "Thank you." I never saw either of them again. A man once asked me if I believed in second chances. I told him, "This cafe is made of them." He smiled and nodded, then pulled out a ring box. I was going to propose to her here 10 years ago, but I chickened out. Now I'm hoping she walks in. He waited all day. No one came. The next day he returned, and the next. On the 5th day she arrived, older, different, but still her. They locked eyes. She said, "You're late." He laughed, dropped to one knee, and proposed. She said yes. They had their first kiss over 2 lattes and a biscotti. I made their wedding cake 2 months later. Vanilla, with red roses. I still have a photo of them behind the counter. Proof that some moments are worth waiting 10 years for. There's a journal I keep under the counter. I call it the guest book of the lost. Whenever something strange happens, or someone unforgettable passes through, I write it down. Not their names, not always. Just their story, their moment, their miracle. The book is thick now, its pages worn and fragrant with coffee and old ink. Sometimes I reread it on quiet nights. It helps me remember why I'm here. Why this cafe, invisible to the world, still matters. Maybe one day someone will find it. Maybe they'll add their own stories. Maybe they'll understand what this place truly is. A crossroads, a resting point, a miracle with chairs and cups and cinnamon. On the air. One late evening, as the last light faded, I found a letter on the front steps. No envelope, no name. It simply said, "You helped me find my way." That's all. No signature. But the handwriting looked familiar, like my mother's. She passed away when I was young. I sat with the letter in my hands for hours. I don't know who left it. Maybe it wasn't for me. Maybe it was for the cafe. Or maybe it was a reminder that healing doesn't come with a loud bang. It comes quietly, in ink, in steam, in memory. That night I lit a candle on every table and let them burn until morning. The cafe glowed like a lighthouse for the wandering hearts of the world. I remember one winter morning when the snow outside fell so heavily it seemed to hush the entire world. I opened the cafe, like always, expecting no one. But an elderly woman came in, shaking snow from her coat, her eyes bright with excitement. "I've been looking for this place for years," she said. She ordered hot chocolate and told me she used to come here with her sister when they were children. She passed away last year. I didn't get to say goodbye. I handed her a second cup, placed it on the opposite side of the table. "You can now," I said. She nodded, whispered a quiet thank you, and sat for hours, sipping slowly, laughing, softly, tears glistening in her eyes. When she left, she said, "This place doesn't just serve drinks. It serves peace." One night, just before closing, a man came in with a stack of papers. He looked exhausted, like life had drained him. He asked for black coffee, no cream, no sugar. He spread the pages across the table, a novel, nearly finished. "I don't know how to end it," he told me. "It's about a man who runs a magical cafe that helps people find what they lost." I smiled. Maybe he realizes he's the one who's been lost all along. He looked up, stunned. "That's it," he whispered. "That's the ending." He stayed until sunrise, typing furiously. When he finished, he hugged me like an old friend. I never saw him again. But a few weeks later, a book arrived in the mail. No note. Just a dedication on the first page. "To the man who reminded me how stories end." Sometimes I wonder who I would be if I hadn't stumbled into this cafe myself years ago. I was young, directionless, running from something I couldn't name. The street pulled me in, like gravity, and the cafe welcomed me like it had been waiting all along. The man behind the counter offered me coffee and said, "It gets better." I never saw him again after that first day. The next morning, the cafe was locked. A week later, I returned, and the key was in my pocket. I opened the door and everything was just waiting, as if the cafe had chosen me. And maybe it had. Maybe we don't find places like this. They find us. I became the new keeper of the stories, the quiet guardian of lost souls and second chances.